This is Navigating Cyber Risk podcast with me, John Riley, and George Usey as your hosts. Join us as we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new and ever-changing cybersecurity mandates. Welcome to Navigating Cyber Risk with your host, John Riley, where we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new cybersecurity mandates. Today, we have an amazing guest who is a 25-year resident of the United States. He's been sailing in the Gulf with a glass of wine, and he's the vice president of liquid logistics for ASF. Welcome, Sten Svendsen.
Very much appreciated.
Well, thanks for being on the show here, Sten. We're going to jump right in. So, one of the main question that we've got is, what do you see as the difference between cybersecurity and cyber risk?
I think they're kind of linked because if you don't have the security, you're at risk inherently. And having had personal experience with a cyber incident, as it was called internally in the organization I was with at the time, I know firsthand how disruptive it can be to a company. And this was a global company, and this happened on a global scale. So risk is every single day, whether it's an email, it's a text, it can be a phone call. Having the security in place helps you mitigate some of those issues and some of those risks before they even hit people's inboxes, or hopefully also their phones, which can be very difficult because most people nowadays are using their personal phone. They don't necessarily have a company phone. So yeah, I think they're very much interlinked, to be quite honest.
In using those personal devices, I mean, I think there's lots of work from home and devices that are not controlled, and trying to track those and understand what those risks are. I think it became more complicated during COVID in general, but I mean, I think now it's in the new world, I think that risk is higher than it was maybe than previously.
Oh, 100%. And the experience that I had personally happened during COVID, which for the most part started out kind of innocently enough, but then it snowballed very, very quickly to the extent that no one could communicate, and you had to essentially yourself create a new Gmail account to sound somewhat similar to your old company account, which of course was a red flag from Google. So that got shut down, and then you had to start another one. So there were several days before anyone could really communicate across platforms in a way that you could keep business going. And being in logistics, that's a 24/7, 365 complete global economy. And if you, for whatever reason, are shut down, living on the Gulf Coast, as you do as well, we have hurricanes, we have storms. So you may lose power for a couple of days, depending on where you live. But losing visibility to your business was massively disruptive. And even though it got rectified relatively quickly within a week or two, those 2 weeks were hugely detrimental to the company. And this was also at the same time as we were onboarding a company that had just been acquired. So you have all these uncertainties and all these factors that are just coming in from left and right. Customers can't contact you. You don't have access to the POs, purchase orders. You don't have access to documentation so customers can get their cargo. It was a nightmare. So when it comes to the security side of things, I'm a huge proponent for that. Obviously, having had very firsthand experience with the extreme negative side, that even though it wasn't necessarily, a ransom thing, there was definitely some people on the other end that held the cards for a while. And it got alleviated. How, I don't know. I wasn't privy to that. That was a little bit above my pay grade. But there can be no doubt that if you don't have methods in place, it can be extremely disruptive to your business.
So, I mean, along those lines, I mean, if you're running a company today, I mean, what do you see as being like the most significant cyber threats that are there?
I mean, again, the first touch point many people get is via email. And it can be an innocent email where it looks similar enough to a vendor or a colleague or a superior that is sending an email with a link or an attachment, and they're asking you to open it. And that's how the incident happened that I was just talking about. Somebody clicked on a link and they were in. So email, training people how to be a little bit vigilant about, don't just hit open an attachment or a link just because it looks somewhat similar, because all it takes is one digit or one letter that is different, which is something I'll get into a little bit later as well, with some other risks that are definitely associated with this. We've had people call me on my mobile phone or also via my work number. We were using Teams at the time, impersonating someone that were supposedly sitting with the CEO of our company, and he needed a $50,000 transfer immediately because he was about to close a business. Now I know that's bogus, but a junior person that may have just joined a company have maybe no idea. They want to save, keep their job. They're, depending on where it is in the world, when they get a call like that, there's some cultural aspect that plays into it, and they are, taught to follow orders essentially. So that was kind of scary as well. And they happened for a while shortly after the cyber incident that I just mentioned.
Sure.
So there's many aspects. And now with AI coming into play as well, I mean, it can become more and more difficult to decipher what's an actual real email versus one that's 100% bogus.
And I think they're even taking that a step further because it's not just email anymore. It's voice patterns. It's
Oh, yeah.
being able to actually use the CEO's voice to make a phone call. I mean, and it's getting to be very difficult, especially as as an employee or something, trying to differentiate. I mean, if you get the email and then you get a voicemail from the CEO saying the same thing, wait a minute, now I've got two or three different ways of being asked. That's gotta be real, right? I mean, and I think that's one of the struggles that is gonna come from that. So, when you're talking about that, I mean, like, if you were a CEO, I mean, how would you prioritize that cyber risk? I mean, because I mean, you gotta run your business, you gotta make money, you gotta do all these things, right? Where do you feel like that cyber risk piece should land?
It's kind of like when you hire someone, and in my line of business, if it's a non-revenue generating position, you really have to justify it. So that's, I mean, heck, that's from hiring IT people, where you need to have IT systems, right? But then security people, that can also be in my line of work when it comes to air freight. And you need to have a person that is, up to speed with anything that is TSA regulated with the Transportation Safety Administration. Security Administration, sorry. If I were to start a company from scratch today, it will rank very high on my priority list, because smaller companies, let's say you're a startup, you 5, 10 people starting up, and then you grow to, let's say, 100 people, that's still a relatively small company. You are very much at risk, just as much as a very large organization, because you may have less fail safes in place. It is, it is relatively, or can be, very expensive piece of investment to make early on, but you have to build it into your business plan from the get-go. And I think also investors and or banks will look at, well, what plans do you have in place when it comes to cybersecurity? Because if I'm going to invest X amount of money into your company, and that money is going to walk out the door because you have to pay somebody ransom to give you back your passwords or whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's a maybe an uncomfortable conversation to have up front, but it needs to happen, because otherwise you are going to be so exposed, or can be so exposed, because nobody is safe anymore. I mean, I don't want to sound like doom and gloom, but just today there was emails coming into my inbox that I had to verify with some colleagues whether they were correct or not. So, and working for a small or mid-sized freight forwarding company today, we are just as much at risk as some of the big players in the market.
Well, so I mean, building that culture, right, of security from the beginning is important. And I think one of the things you mentioned was like a growth company going from 10 employees to 100 employees. I mean, there's a point where the CEO maybe doesn't necessarily know every single person, or they're especially if you're in a high growth industry where you're just hiring people. You need butts and seats, right? I mean, and so then it becomes, who is this person? And, maybe you're doing background checks and maybe you're doing the best that you can. And that's when I think the controls really start to become important, because you don't have that personal knowledge. You're not going out for lunch with the CEO, or and you lose some of that, especially in a high growth, quick environment like that.
100%. And then if you then add on to that, if you have offices in other countries, then different time zones, and you can't get hold of someone because it's in the middle of the night, and you can't get verification because so and so is asleep or traveling or whatever it might be. So yeah, it becomes in some cases more difficult because there's more layers. I mean, especially if you're in a rather large organization, there's a lot of layers to it. Getting someone to answer a question very quickly becomes very difficult.
Absolutely. So, what do you think is going to have the biggest influence coming up what is there technologies and such that are happening? What do you think is going to happen with cybersecurity with some of these new technologies, and what'll have the biggest impact?
I think, again, even though I'm not trying to date myself here, I mean, I am dabbling with AI because, resistance is futile as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you might as well embrace it because it's going to happen. It's happening. There's more and more tools becoming available on a daily basis. And I think everyone would be kidding themselves if they said they haven't used AI to, write a letter or, at least proofread reading, letters and stuff like that, because it's actually very easy to do that and it's becoming very convenient. Likewise, when it comes to cybersecurity, I think there may be some measures in place where there will be companies that will be able to give you a tool that will give you at least a first line of defense, so that you have a little bit of a firewall. Use a good old terminology there from back in the day, but they're still very much true today. So I think with something like that coming into play, there will be more tools to your disposal, and sometimes they will be relatively affordable, but then they'll also be likewise on the other side. Clearly, someone's going to be investing a lot of time and money and effort into breaking those systems.
Very much so. I mean, we've got AI, we've got quantum computing, we've got a lot of things that are starting to come out. I mean, and even the robotics and automation. I think that there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to be happening here over the next period. So I always like to hear where those pieces are coming in for everybody else, because it's almost like being too close to understanding all of those things, because everything looks like a big impact on where we're going. So the next question I've got for you is really along the lines. I mean, you've kind of partially already answered it, which is because you've lived it. Which is, what do you think it feels like to be in that situation where, oh my God, all the data's hacked, and and since you kind of already talked about that, talk about, like, were you prepared? I mean, did you actually have like a disaster recovery plan? Did you have like a communication plan? I mean, you may not have been in that situation, at that level, but I mean, if you were looking at it today, would do you think that do you think that the company was prepared for it? Were they practiced at it?
As much as they could be, I think, at the time. And to answer your question, I was in charge of an office here in Houston with 50 people. Again, part of a global organization and very much in communication with overseas offices on a daily basis. So to lose that connectivity, yeah, I had people's phone numbers and I could text with message with people and WhatsApp and whatnot. When we use WhatsApp a lot to trying to get ahead and try to communicate and try to also give staff the ability to contact customers and overseas colleagues to keep. I mean, and being in logistics, we move containers from A to Z and communicate with vendors to keep the ball rolling. It was hugely disruptive, as I mentioned early on, and it's a very helpless feeling, because you know that when a container sits for too long, it's going to start accumulating what's called demurrage or per diem, which is a cost that is, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. If you haven't picked up the container or delivered that container, you have to pay that out of pocket. So not only are you not getting new business coming in and keeping the revenue stream growing, you can't get containers returned. So that means your costs just keep compounding on a global scale. I have no visibility to what the total exposure was financially, but I'm assuming it's in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, or close to millions when you look at it on a complete global scale. There were some regions that were less impacted than others.
Sure.
The company had a somewhat fractured infrastructure when it came to the IT systems. I mean, it was a global IT system, so everybody communicated on the same, let's say, operational platform, if you will. But when it came to cybersecurity, that was very much, decentralized to each country. So some countries came back online. The servers were rebuilt quicker in some regions than others. So, and that was if I remember correctly, 3,500 to 4,000 individuals globally. So a sizable organization. And I don't think they had done enough over the time to get ahead of it. They were trying to manage as best as they could because, again, do you invest millions of dollars into this in case something may happen? But of course, now looking hindsight, they're like, well, holy moly, here, had we just spent that money or done a little bit more here and there? But, it's hindsight is 2020.
That's always the case. I mean, I think that, for us, I mean, a lot of times when that scare happens, that's some of our best customers, unfortunately. I mean, because they then appreciate what that preparedness, right? even if
Oh
it's not
yeah.
necessarily a full breach or something. Just having that sunk feeling in the stomach that,
Oh yeah.
data, or, that you've been compromised or violated in that way is just,
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and then you can't communicate with your customers, so your competitors are swooping in. They're taking some business away, and it takes a long time to recover that because a lot of the companies that my previous employer was working with were blue chip 500, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies that have extreme, security measures when it comes to compliance as well. So not just, financial and ethical and all that kind of fun stuff, but certainly also when it comes to cybersecurity, more of them are now beginning to implement that into their master service agreements or global contracts, if you will. It wasn't at the time. I mean, we're talking 2019, if I remember correctly, 2020 thereabout. So yeah, just shortly before COVID started. And yeah, something like that, it was an eye opener to many people. I think there's no doubt about that.
Which kind of is interesting because, I mean, we're seeing more of that in the contracts that, third party vendor management, questions, do you have a cybersecurity program? How do you deal with that? Especially if you're dealing with the data of your customers, I guess if you're dealing, with certain parts of it. But, those guarantees that a lot of companies are just signing, some sort of an MSA or, some sort of a contract without actually reading it and understanding that they may be on the hook to actually create some of these things.
I mean, especially when you then also have to link with that customers like through SAP. So they can place bookings and orders right into your system and vice versa. So there's an open link between the organizations. So if you had a breach of trust, essentially, they may be not so inclined to open up the floodgates again until you've proven that things are actually hunky dory. So that also took a long time to rebuild some of that trust because you had that breach. I mean, it's happened to some of the largest shipping lines in the world as well. So, and we were a much smaller player than that. So it can happen to anybody, but it does take a long time to rebuild that trust. And some of those contracts may never have been, recovered.
Right, and it's always easier to keep a customer than it is to gain a new one, right? So
100%.
so that's the important thing to know is that, when you're playing that cyber risk game, there is that option of, possibly losing those customers because of lack of preparedness or lack of, understanding on that.
Correct.
All right, Sten. So tell me a little bit about, who are you? I mean, where I mean, you're Danish.
Yeah.
You've been in the United States. So tell us a little more.
Yeah, no, I mean, as mentioned, I came over 25 years ago. I became a citizen back in 2021. My wife considered me a flight risk until I became a citizen. I'm kidding. No, I mean, this is my home now. I moved from Denmark to the UK and then from the UK to the US. So we had, a very quick transition from 99 to the UK and then within a year and a half already to the US. Not too much. It was a big culture shock coming to Texas of all places because I'd never been to the States before that. Over the years, having been in logistics and transportation, I've had the good fortune of traveling to most states. I think there's like 4 or 5 I'm still missing to actually check off my list. So I've seen a lot of the country, and over the years I've also started working with the Danish American Chamber of Commerce. In fact, I was one of the founders here in Houston for a Danish American Chamber of Commerce to help build working relationships between American companies that want to invest in Denmark and vice versa, Danish company want to invest in the U.S., which resulted in a Danish consulate being opened in Houston about 5 years ago. So there's a lot of activity now with delegations going both ways. Houston's more than just oil and gas. There's also for life sciences. There's of course the aerospace industry, which my wife works in. Being NASA is right here in Houston. So I've had the good fortune of being exposed to many things in the 25 years that I've been here that I would not have had the opportunity to do if I had a comment and stayed in Denmark. Don't get me wrong, I love my country, my old country. Don't get me wrong, I like to have a small place there when I retire someday and use that as a traveling point all over Europe. So yeah, I mean, and right now, I am sitting in my home office with 3 dogs behind me. They're being nice and calm right now, so I'm doing that right now. I can tell you that. And so yeah, I mean, it's that in a nutshell is pretty much who I am.
I've got one under my chair as well. So
There you go.
not three, but I get it. So, like, tell me, what are you working on that you're most excited about?
So, having joined ASF just recently, in January, the liquid division within ASF is something new, relatively new. So, it's myself and a partner that's essentially kicking that off the ground, which means I'm reaching out to contacts throughout my network, some that I haven't spoken to in a long time. So, it's kind of fun to be able to build something from scratch, having come from a small entrepreneurial organization in the early days of my career, going back 30 years. I started when I was 12, wink, wink, to having that company being absorbed by a large organization and then eventually absorbed by one of the largest freight forwarding companies in the world with 500 and some thousand employees. It's very refreshing to come back to a small organization with three offices in the US and a handful in Asia and build something from scratch where taking some of the things that we've learned over the years and essentially pulling out what we think are the best parts, which is customer service. The bigger you get, the further you get from your customers, I think, and you start adding more layers because there's more people and stakeholders on both sides that want to have a piece of the pie and feel like they have control of that customer. I don't like to use that word per se. So being coming full circle, if you will, starting something from scratch. It's really invigorating and something that is hugely exciting. And I feel there's a vacuum in the market because there's a lot of players in my industry that are very large. And don't get me wrong, you have a lot of small players. What I do is very niche market, being in the liquid side. So that's encouraging to hear that customers are very accepting of that and very interested in what you do. And despite all the disruptions that are going on with the Red Sea and Panama Canal, sometimes I know people may not be aware of these situations. You just get stuff in your stores, but with the Panama Canal, there's low water. That means ships can't go through, and with the Red Sea, you have to sail south of South Africa, which prolongs transit and all that kind of fun stuff. And then you throw on top all the tariffs and whatnot. So right now, it's very exciting to be in logistics.
You and I talked about this a little bit before, but I mean, so when you're talking liquid logistics, right?
Mhm.
I mean, so you mentioned some of the things that you actually have shipped or have done. I mean, I'm sure the audience would also like to understand that. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so liquid is anything you can put in a steel tank or a drum or a tote, IBC tote, or a flexi bag, which is one of the things we do quite a bit of. So that's a big old water bag you put inside a standard 20-foot container that you see driving the road on the vessels. And then we will load a liquid product at origin. And we do this globally, not just in the US domestically. So let's say I'm in Houston, so there's a lot of petrochemical here. We move a lot of base oils, as it's called, that can then go into other products, one of which is lubricant for your car. We do ship lubricants for your car as well, Mobile One, stuff like that, very similar to countries in Latin America where they put them in the cars. And that is very cyclical. So in the spring, there's a lot of actions because the lubricants has to go to Latin America before the winter rush, because when it's winter down there, it's somewhere here and vice versa. So you get to learn about different markets and different commodities because we move anything from orange juice to wine, yes, wine, to, as I mentioned, the base oils. We move vegetable oils, canola oils, palm oils. I mean, pretty much anything that's liquid that can go inside a container, we move it. So we need to have a little bit of an understanding of many different markets because we diversify as much as we can because sometimes, as I just mentioned, there's ebbs and flows, and a lot of it is also very seasonal.
if I wanted to open a pizza shop and have New York water delivered, you're the guy.
I can do that too. Heck, we can move that from Fiji and Hawaii. Very quick anecdote. I have moved water from Scotland from a spring in a bag, the big bag, like a 6,000-gallon bag in a container to Japan. And they use that water to make ice cubes for their scotch. No joke.
I mean, if yeah, I can see that. I mean, when I was in San Diego, there was I mean, many different pizza companies or
Yeah.
New York pizza, and they say that the water in New York is what makes it different. So then they do actually
Same
ship.
with the bagels. You can't
That's
get a
right.
good bagel in Texas. Trust me, I know that
That's
one.
right.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. So and so I mean, you just got to figure out how to connect to that water supply there and just start shipping it all over.
absolutely. Pretty much.
Great. So then tell me more. I mean, you kind of talked about the company. I mean, is there anything else we should know about ASF?
Yeah, it's more than just liquids. We also do a lot of imports from Asia. As I mentioned early on, we have some offices over there, like four in China, one in Vietnam. So furniture imports, something we do a lot of into the Carolinas. I have been doing for many years. One of our owners was a lumber trader early on in his career, and we still move a lot of lumber out of Mobile and places like that. We move I guess, in general, freight forwarder, anything that can go in a container, we move. We do air freight as well, and we move yachts from the U.S. to the Caribbean and to the Mediterranean and places like that. Because it can be expensive to sail. You can be, of course, having issues where you got to have a crew, but sometimes it may make a little bit more sense to put the vessel on a vessel,
Sure.
big one, of course, and then
Bigger.
ship it
Yeah.
to the Mediterranean or back for that matter. So people a lot of money, they tend to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, especially during hurricane season, you want it out of the,
Oh,
insurance doesn't cover you there. So then you got to move it out. I mean, as a sailor, there's definitely some things that you got to know about that and the insurance and the reasons. So,
yeah.
so let me ask you this. If you could go back in time, and give younger self some advice, what would that be?
Well, yeah, life and your career is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and patience is something that will pay off at the end of the day. And I think maybe also having been, I'm not gonna say hot tempered, but enthusiastic, to dial that down a wee bit in some situations. Because yeah, I mean you still gotta pay your dues. I'm also ex-military from Denmark, so I know rank and file and all that kind of good stuff. And so it took me a long time when I got into to private work that you still got to pay your dues. So that's definitely a key one for myself that just don't worry, it'll come. It'll come. Just keep doing what you're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, your results speak louder than anything else.
Yeah, keep working at it. You got. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
come. It generally doesn't come quickly. It's
No.
a little changes along the way that make the big action.
And don't compromise on your own integrity, right? I mean, if you have a high barometer for integrity and you want to maintain that, which is also in my industry, at least, you're only as good as your word and your result. For me, that's something that's really been proven over and over and over again that if you have high integrity, if you leave a company, don't slam doors, don't burn bridges. I've come back to the same organization 3 times and I just left it for the fourth time. No joke, for various reasons. And sometimes for bigger and better opportunities and whatnot. But so that one is also very, very high on my list with the integrity. Don't compromise on that.
All right. So here's the last question I got for you, which is so. What advice would you give to our audience, right? About cybersecurity or even life? I mean, your choice.
I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious from the conversation if they've lasted this long that having gone through a pretty traumatic experience as it was, and very costly for an organization, you have to take it serious, educate yourself, talk to several different people within the industry to learn a little about how maybe other people are doing it in your same industry. Not necessarily your competitors, but your customers and your vendors. How are they doing it? If you have colleagues overseas, how are they doing it? What are they dealing with? And how are they overcome some of these situations? I think just, don't sweep it under the rug because if you do and if it comes up and hits you, it's going to be very, very costly and very, very painful. So I think just being alert about it and aware and educate yourself is key. And that's really the first step. You don't have to commit to anything today, but you got to start educating yourself 100%.
Excellent. So, Sten, how can people find you? How would you like them to reach out to you?
I have a LinkedIn, but I know you guys will also, be sharing my contact details. They'll get my email address. Anyone is more than welcome to contact me. Doesn't have to be for work or they want to ship something, but if they want to learn about the cyber incident that I've gone through, I will also say that if you deal with international trade, you will be sending or receiving payments from international companies, and unfortunately, there's also been customers and vendors that have been caught in that where they thought they sent someone some money they didn't, because again, just a one digit was different, and it went to a different account, and that money was just gone. I know the FBI gets involved, but that's not always a saving grace. So there's many layers to this, especially if you are in international trade, and then I'll be happy to share my experiences. Absolutely.
And that even happens in local. I mean, so many times. I mean, we get your requests for, hey, change my account or do this. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's always interesting.
Absolutely.
Sten, thank you for all your insight, and I appreciate your time. This has been great. For our audience, thanks for listening. I hope you learned something today. Take some of this to heart and understand that it does happen. And Sten, I think you're one of the first ones to actually have that closeness with a cyber incident. So I appreciate your viewpoint on that.
Of course.
So this has been another awesome episode of Navigating Cyber Risk with your hosts John and Riley and Sten. So Sten, it's been great. See you next time, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
This was another amazing episode of Navigating Cyber Risk, powered by Omnistruct. Show us some love by subscribing and sharing today. Reach out to us with any comments, questions, or ideas about future shows by emailing us at podcast@omnistruct.com. Until next time, remember, governance is not a technology.